So again, this is CCRS and TIF, a match made in heaven. This is our third CCRS support webinar and our final one for this fiscal year. As I said, I'm Kristine Kelly, Literacy Coordinator. Lindsey and Carly, if you'd like to quickly introduce yourselves.
Yes, I'm Lindsey Pust. I'm the Numeracy and Special Projects Coordinator with Atlas.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carly Voshell, and I work with Atlas on transitions.
Great, thank you. So our agenda today is we're gonna talk just briefly about our objectives for today, and Patsy's going to lead us through a warm-up. We're going to talk about what skills adult learners need for work. And then we're going to do have some discussion around making connections with our programs and with career pathway transitional work. And then Lindsey and I are going to go through some strategies for implementation. We all are actually, so that we can show you very concretely how CCRS and TIF come together. So our objectives are to articulate the interrelationships among TIF and CCRS skills and how they're really foundational to our work. I often say that, in fact, the CCRS needs the TIF and the skills and strategies in the TIF so to be able to do the work of the CCRS. We're going to identify 3 to 5 ways to strengthen instruction that make the TIF and CCRS transparent to teachers and learners. And you will have an opportunity to access resources for further exploration and some ways to network with colleagues, because this is work that we're all doing. Now I'm going to turn it over to Patsy, who's going to lead us through a warm-up.
Oh, thanks for being here this afternoon. I'm glad to be a part of this group. You're in good hands with Kristine and Carly and Lindsey. So yeah, I'd like everyone to find your chat box. And if you haven't opened it up yet, do so now. Find your keyboard and just think back to like the last few days of your life. And we're thinking about projects that you have recently completed or maybe are in the midst of completing. Because so much of just everyday adulting that we are involved with in our daily life is basically complex project management. And so a couple that come to mind for me, for example, like a home improvement task or dealing with an insurance claim that got denied or wasn't processed correctly. So let me see some examples. There are about 15 of you here, so I'd love to see at least a dozen examples in the chat box of some complex projects you've had to navigate recently in the chat box. What's something you've had to adult through in recent days or weeks? And our co-presenters are welcome to add theirs as well. Birthday party, braces, oh dear, kitchen remodel, guardianship, internship, family reunion. Oh, that's a lot to organize, Susan. A capstone, oh my gosh, Nikki, yes. Kids sports teams dealing with all the summer scheduling, taxes, yes, absolutely, thank you. A lot of coordinating on top of all of that. Finishing CEUs for renewal. Yes, those of us who have licensure know what that is like. No easy task. Thank you. New refrigerator that actually fits into the space. Thank you, Rosie. Yes, all of that takes a lot of coordinating. Yeah, thank you. These are, and there's so many more. Keep them coming. Ironic that this webinar happened to be during tax week, so I'm sure all of those help. Many of us had to do that very recently, if not on Monday. Like all of these projects, I just want to point out, these are the tasks that we and our students deal with just in doing the everyday work of being a grown-up, right? And so something to keep in mind, of course, is that all of these skills that are involved with doing these things cross through different sort of what I think of like the basket of instruction that we provide. I would argue that many of the things that you just chatted out have academic skills that were involved with them. Right, so there's some reading, there's some math. I'm thinking of your refrigerator, Rosie, you had to measure probably and make it fit. The taxes, lots of math involved. There's also there's some interpersonal relationships with some of these. I'm thinking of the family reunion, and there is no doubt some negotiating that is involved with some of that. The CEUs for renewal talk about navigating systems. There's some ACEs skills going on here as far as figuring out what do you need for which category, what counts for what, organizing, problem solving, all of the many things. So there are academic skills involved. There are ACEs TIF skills involved. Then there are some career and workplace things involved with some of these as well, and some community and career stuff involved as well. So, and then we haven't even talked about digital literacy. Many of the things you just named in the chat box involve some pretty high level digital literacy skill as well to complete. So in order to just get through sort of the daily work of being a grown up and doing stuff in a home and with a family and getting together with our people, involves all of these skills. So that's just a warm up to what is about to happen as we talk through how CCRS and ACEs really do go together. Go back to you. And to Carly.
Thank you for that warm up. I was like nodding and as I saw things listed out on the chat. So those were a lot of great examples, everyone. We're going to take that warm up and now kind of turn our attention to the world of work and career preparation for our students. And so I'm posing a bit of a rhetorical question here about what skills do adult learners need for work? And the answer really to that is it's a lot of different answers, right? There's challenges inherent in answering that question. If I am in a classroom with 10 students, chances are those 10 students have lots of different careers that they're interested in. They don't all want to be working in the healthcare field or all want to be working in the construction field. There's different interests for different students. The specific skills that they need, whether they're academic or transition skills or digital literacy skills, can vary depending on the type of career. You know, if it's a pipe fitting or a trade, there's going to be certain types of math. There's still math in healthcare, but it might look a lot different. So that's one of the challenges. It's also hard, and I'm totally speaking for myself right now, to just be knowledgeable about all these different career fields, especially as they change over time. You know, many of us could agree that there's more technology, there's more automation in most careers. One type of career from 10 or 20 years ago looks different now. And in addition to that, things like how we communicate with coworkers looks completely different now than it did before COVID. So those are some of the challenges that we have in adult education to be knowledgeable about work and preparing our students for work. And we can go to the next slide. And yet that task is something that we do need to work on. We need to do some research and learn more about different career fields. And we're going to spend some time on that today together. And in order to do that, we're going to look at a job skill breakdown, and the resource we're going to use is called the Competency Model Clearinghouse. And this is not something brand new. It's a national resource that we're going to share the website to. They don't have every single career on there, but they have maybe 50 to 70 different careers. And they've got a lot of information that breaks down what specific skills you need for CNA, for construction, for food service, and information technology. Those are the 4 careers that I picked for us to look at today. And when I chose those, I was thinking about what are kind of common or popular ones for our students in adult education. And I also kind of wanted some diversity there, like not all healthcare jobs, not all trade jobs. So I picked these 4, and actually I am going to request remote control so that I can click on one of these competency models to show you, because this is a great resource. Here we go. But it's a big resource. And so I want to walk you through it so that we don't get overwhelmed. The one I chose to kind of show you all together is on residential construction. And I really don't know much about this area. I watch HGTV sometimes, but I don't really know much about construction, right? I've never worked in this field. So for me, this is a good one to do some research on so that I can gain information and experience with this career field. So on the very first page is a graphic that might be familiar to some of you if you've seen this resource before. I kind of think of it as building blocks or Legos or something. The different colors and the different labels are different skills that are required for this career. And again, we're looking at residential construction now. So I'm going to start at the base of the building blocks. That category is called personal effectiveness. That is called tier 1 in this competency model. The next 2 tiers are the ones that we're really going to focus in on today: academic competencies and workplace competencies. The one thing that I see on this first page is they're kind of just really general topics. So for academic competencies for residential construction, it says reading, writing, math, science, communication, and basic computer. Well, yeah, all of those things are kind of involved in this career, but it's really not breaking it down into those concrete details on this page. It will in the next few pages. And then as we go to tier 3, it's called workplace competencies. And those categories are teamwork, following directions, planning and scheduling, problem solving and decision making, working with tools and technology, checking, examining and recording, and craftsmanship. Again, there's some titles, there's some headings, but we're not exactly sure the full breakdown of those competencies. It'll show us a little bit later in the form. But as we go up on this building block, the skills and competencies are going to get more specific to this field. So as we get into that yellow area, we're looking at specific industry-wide competencies, certifications or trainings that you're only going to find with residential construction, for instance. So I do want people to look at this first page and kind of get a sense of what are the basic skills that are required. But it's this tier 2 and tier 3 that we really want to examine more closely. And so I'm going to skip ahead to tier 1 and tier 2 on this document. You might be able to see that this is 24 pages. We're not going to have time to look over the whole thing, but here is where the academic competencies are listed out in a lot more detail, right? So on that first page, it talked about reading, but here it really defines what types of reading, what types of writing, and it's breaking down those skills into itty bitty pieces. And then I am going to move into tier 3. Here we go, which is called workplace competencies. And again, we saw the title of teamwork, following directions, but now here it's broken down even more. So this is one of the examples that you have to choose from with these competency models. We were looking at construction, but there's 4 total. And there we go. So what we're going to do now is we're going to spend 5 minutes on some silent reading. You are going to pick one of these competency models to choose from. Which one should you pick? Well, I wanted to pick residential construction to learn more about that career field that I don't know much about. Maybe if you work with a CNA or a healthcare career pathway at your site, take the opportunity to learn a little bit more about something you know less about. Otherwise, if you have a lot of students that are interested in IT, for instance, you could choose to look at the information technology competency model to just gain more information and knowledge there. And again, I want everybody to review the graphic on page 1, see what those building blocks are, and then look specifically at tier 2 academic competencies and tier 3 workplace competencies. And on the link that Gail just chatted out, it has the links to the 3 different readings. And I am just going to start this 5-minute timer. And you're going to take 5 minutes to read through one of those competency models. On and unmute just so we can really engage with each other, because that's kind of the fun part about a breakout room. The directions are on that link that was shared before, but what we want you to do in your group is talk about this question. What do you notice and wonder while looking at the competency models? And if you can make any connections to CCRS and ACES TIF, we would love for you to discuss that as well. We're going to be in a breakout for 5 minutes, and you're going to pick which breakout to go into based on the career that you read. So there's going to be one for CNA, IT, construction, and one more. So we're going to start those breakout rooms.
Okay, I'm going to open them right now.
Okay, you guys, welcome back to the large group. So you spent 5 minutes, kind of like a lightning round discussion here, looking at that competency model and talking about it. And we are just looking for some basic share out now about what you guys talked about.
This is Jeremy from Moorhead. Carly and I visited about the IT PDF or competency model, and my question for her right away was like that coding on the side. It wasn't CCRS. What was that supposed to lead me to? And apparently on the website there might I didn't find it yet, but there might be some more information about those competencies there. And I really liked that because some of them are very specific to the careers, and it would be nice to know more about those, more about some of those, and especially to give that information to students. And so that was my big question that I got answered.
Thank you for sharing, Jeremy. And Kristine, can you move to the next slide, please? Thank you. Yeah, so those skills are broken down into these tiny pieces, and it's not the same sub skills as some of the other things we use in adult basic education, but hopefully you saw some of those same things broken down like what we see in CCRS or ACES TIF. Anything else that people noticed or wondered about when they were looking at those?
This is Julie. I did the construction list, and I wondered how much of the technical part, the math, the communications and reading about blueprints, charts, etc., would not really be applicable to entry-level positions, and if the program working with people wanting to get into that job should really focus on the work skills, getting to work on time and following directions and professionalism and all of that. And then I wondered, but if someone did have better math skills, they might move up in the chain of positions available faster.
Yeah, that's a really good point about kind of a range of experience levels, entry level, managerial levels. And the way, you know, my personal take on those building blocks is what starts at the bottom of those professional skills are really the foundation, right? And it kind of builds from there. But I'd love to hear other thoughts that people have about what they saw. We've got some things shared in the chat. Nikki noticed quite a bit under writing competencies. Yeah, and sometimes, you know, you kind of learn something like, I didn't realize that much is there. Right? Julie mentioned that only one of the links worked for her, so I'm sorry about that. They should have been all PDFs. Yeah, feel free to share anything else in the chat. But hopefully that's a helpful resource that you can look at if you do have those questions. What are the skills needed for that career? You'll find those competency models listed in a lot of career pathway toolkits, and it's a national resource, so it's just worth kind of sharing out and reminding people about that. We can go to the next slide now.
So there are just a couple things that we want to point out as far as making connections, things that we're probably all already thinking. But these were some thoughts that kind of came out when we were discussing what we were going to talk about today, and also kind of mirroring things we've heard other leaders say. But that our job is really to prepare our students for transformation and opportunity, and not prepare them for a particular career. And I think, you know, noticing how many different academic competencies are in each of those models. And, you know, we can look at the specificity of the skills under each of those tiers. I love this resource. But there is that level of specificity, but at the same time, we don't want to just have our students, we don't want to pick for our students. We don't want to have a narrow offering for our students. There's so much that overlaps between the different models. Between the different, you know, whether you looked at CNA or construction or the information technology, there's so much overlap, and there's so much overlap to what we're doing in our classes already with our standards-based instruction. And so just kind of keeping that in mind of like really building up these skills to then prepare our students to have options and opportunities and transformation, you know, those opportunities for transformation. So you can go
And
to
I would add, Lindsey, that, you know, in the 20 plus years that I worked with students, I rarely had a student who didn't have goals beyond just getting a job. And, you know, sometimes we talked about that. Many times students would come and they would have an idea, or they would think they were very limited and that they were limited to, you know, by their skills. And as they gained confidence and as they gained more skills, they started to express that, you know, they needed a job, but they had goals either to move forward on a real career pathway or to become, you know, a supervisor. You know, I had a student who at a housekeeping company, he wanted to be a supervisor, and the one thing holding him back, his boss said he needed to learn how to write better. So I think that, you know, what you said about transformation and opportunity, I think when we talk to our students, we know they have hopes and dreams. Sometimes they just need the confidence that they can move in that direction.
And just to go along with that, having this mindset that we're cultivating, this culture that we're cultivating of career pathways with the interactions we have with our students, so that it's not its own separate thing reserved for some students at a particular level. And I know that I was very much guilty of that when I was in the classroom. And so part of it, most of it, was just my ignorance around career pathways and what I should be doing and what's available. But kind of having that at the forefront, you know, using these competency models to pull out those specific skills, pull out that specific relevance to various students of what we're doing in class and how it's building and preparing them and setting them up for options in the future. So for all students. So on the next slide, in the chat, if you wouldn't mind sharing your thoughts. So, you know, looking at thinking about our own lives, we started with that warm up, then looking at how this directly applies to adult learners and the different skills and competencies that we teach and that we could be teaching or could be pointing out using those competency models. And so kind of having those things in the background and then looking at this graphic. This graphic is an official graphic. I guess that's the word I can use. It's an official graphic. It's on our website. These are the standards that Minnesota has adopted for instruction, for adult education. And so the question is, if you were looking at this graphic, you're an outsider looking in, what does this graphic, the way it's constructed, the way it's laid out, what does it communicate to you about our standards in adult education in Minnesota and about the values that we in Minnesota ABE, that our system holds? So I'll give you a moment to think about that question, and please add your thoughts in the chat. If you would like to unmute as an alternative, you are welcome to do that as well. What does this communicate to you about what we value and about our standards? I'll give you a moment. I'll practice my wait time. Seen some great responses. I'll read through them in just a moment, give people a chance to write. But if you are watching the recording, I will share with you. Yeah, one set of standards is not more important than the others. The desire for education to be well-rounded and address many areas of life. Education is more than academics. That we take a 360-degree approach to learning and instruction. Transition skills are the thing that everything else relies on or rests on. I like that. Yeah, it is. All aspects of learning are equally important. Yes, that is a great question, Julie. Kind of going along with Patsy's noticing, like, is TIF at the bottom because it's foundational? We do face that in our lives. And so it's kind of what academic skills and digital literacy skills are resting on. Learning is continuous. All standards are important. I love this. And I think too, it's, we have these transition skills, and I guess I didn't even notice that, but it's so true. Like, that's what everything rests on. So I love that we have the transition skills, the academic skills, the digital literacy skills. These are those big buckets. And then how do we get there? We have these 3 sets of standards that kind of help us get to those larger areas, right? And so that this is the way that Minnesota has adopted to provide us guidance when we are in our classrooms on what skills students need to be successful in their next steps, whether that's college, whether that's trade, work, community, and so kind of providing that. And I just love this idea about how it's like a wheel rolling forward. Learning is never finished. It's always in progress, right? This 360 view. There are so many noticings in here that I didn't pull out, but man, this graphic is quite nuanced. Yeah, content is central. It matters what we're teaching about. The skills don't exist in a vacuum. Yes. Yeah. And there's so many different things that we know, so many different barriers we could identify that might hold students back. And so there's a variety of things that we want to include in our instruction and giving students practice. So everything we teach must include these standards. So there's a lot of relationships here just within this graphic that you're all pulling out. And that's exactly what those competency models showed when we're preparing students for career pathways, or when others are preparing students for career pathways in a more specific sense. It's not in a vacuum, right? Like, there's so much that is interrelated. And so we wanted to call that out. I think we can move on.
I just want to say that, we spent a lot of time looking at this graphic and working to get it to something that we felt really good about. And just by the responses, I think it communicates very much so what we were hoping it communicated. So that's pretty cool. Strategies for implementation. Carly, I think you're going to talk a little bit about creating that culture of career pathways.
Yeah, so this is kind of an idea that we introduced a few slides ago, which is kind of like a lofty, like, big picture goal, right? But I wanted to break that down into more kind of concrete suggestions for activities that you can do at your site to create that culture of career pathways, or what it could look like. And these are ideas that I've gathered over time, and have just been hearing more about this idea of a culture of career pathway. Number 1, all staff should be knowledgeable about career pathway options and requirements. I know there has been times at my program where the beginning English or the intermediate English teacher doesn't really know what we offer or what a student needs to do to get ready for that career pathway. And that's just a missed opportunity. How are we supposed to encourage our students to enter those classes if we don't know much about them? So asking teachers to share about that at staff meetings and things could be just a way to kind of build that knowledge. And that includes intake staff, because really when students walk in the building, that's when recruitment can start for career pathways. Talking about, this is the class you're going to start out with, but these are options down the road. I always think another purpose of telling students at intake about all the different options they have is it's just, the perfect recruiting strategy. Maybe they have a sister, a brother, a neighbor, somebody down the street, a child, a grown child who could participate in one of those classes, and they can help us spread the word too about career pathway classes. this next one is something that I have definitely experienced as a career pathway instructor, where a student who's maybe in an English class or a GED class wants to join the program that I teach on Microsoft Office Specialists. And the idea is that I'm kind of stealing that student, right? Taking them from one class and having them join a career pathway class. And I can definitely see both sides of that, but really isn't the ultimate goal to help students earn certifications, find a job where they can sustain themselves. That really is the goal. And we need to follow whatever the student sees for what's going to help them. So we just want to avoid kind of that competition mentality and do more with working together and helping students to achieve those goals. Another thing I would suggest, if you're not already doing this already, is just to make sure that transitions is a part of every time you meet as a consortium or as a program, if it's a staff meeting or something. Even making sure that any transition communication goes to all teachers, all staff at your program, and not just the people that specifically do navigation or career pathways. I've been on workforce boards in the past where only a few people got those emails about the job fairs that are happening and different resources, different hiring events. If all staff don't know about it, it's like it's not existing. And if teachers get this information, they can share it with their students. Another great way to just meet with employers and kind of figure out what are the local needs is to show up at a job fair. I've done that before. And of course, I'm not trying to take time away from employers who are trying to connect with individuals, but just to like have a casual conversation, get some business cards, tell them what you do in ABE. And right now, employers are really open to collaborating because they're having a tough time finding people and retaining people at their businesses and organizations. And then last but not least, I'm a regional transition coordinator. And so I want to make a plug for connecting with your RTC, your regional transition coordinator. Again, that person is not just a resource for managers or specific staff. They really should be somebody who's sharing and connecting with all staff in your transition region to make sure that everybody knows what's happening. What are the classes that are being offered? How do the online statewide courses work? Even talking about specific needs and in-demand careers in your area. So those are just some specific concrete examples on creating that culture of career pathways.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in. This is Patsy again. My time in the classroom was in that very scenario you described, in that low-level ESL classroom where career pathways was absolutely not on my radar. I'm teaching English over here. Don't bug me. I'm talking about career stuff. Like, it was the lowest level with the students who are not literate in their first languages. And, I did that for many years. And I think to the detriment of the students in the program, really. Ours was a very small, it was a community-based organization, and we did not talk about careers at all. It's a program actually no longer exists, so I can talk about it, but the part of it, I think, was that we simply did not think of ourselves, I'll speak for myself, I did not think of myself as being someone like that was part of a longer trajectory for these learners. I really was just thinking about the class I was teaching and like the next level. And like, that was it. I wasn't thinking of like 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road for these students. I was just thinking of this level and the level Cindy, that person across the hall, was teaching, and like, that was it. So I think what you're doing here, Carly, and with Lindsey and Kristine and their work, is thinking about the longer trajectory of our students and how we're all part of that. And I think that's really exciting. And this was long before standards were part of the adult ed puzzle. It was long before CCRS came out. And I think what's been exciting in the field in the last 10, oh gosh, we're now at 11 years since the CCRS came out, that it has given us some common language and some common understanding of what students need to know and be able to do to move forward into whatever's next. And this was long before ACEs. So all of this has taken some time to like find its way into the kind of the landscape of our work, and we're there, and it's neat to see.
And I would echo that, Patsy. For years, you know, I would teach, I was teaching like a GED prep class, and we would have our guidance counselor, Dan, would bring in employers, or there would be information about, you know, career pathway programming and other opportunities. And I would always, when students would want to go or he needed a classroom, I would open up my classroom, and in there was nothing that I was going to teach that day that was going to be more important than, you know, students considering their options. So, you know, I would say, yeah, we're talking about, you know, independent and dependent clauses today. We can talk about that next time so that students could participate and hear their different options. So, but you know, you have to get your head around it, you know, that we all have to support each other in a program and the work we're all doing. Lindsey is going to take over here and lead us through some pretty cool transferable math thinking.
Yeah, so if you opened that activity link in the chat, if your heart rate went up when you looked at it, or if you click on it now and your heart rate goes up, you're normal. No, I purposely picked this activity. So if you want to look at it on your own, it is in the chat. If you want to look at the screen, I'm also going to open it now and kind of slowly go through it. I'm not going to explain the tool yet. I'm going to have us like briefly experience it together in the large group. And then I'll explain like, why am I talking about this? Okay, so we're going to kind of be students first. So I just want you, I'll make this a little bit bigger if you're looking at my screen. I just want you to scan through this. I don't want you to solve them. I just want you to kind of scan through the questions, look at anything on the page, and that's all I want you to do. Take about a minute or two to do that. All right, I purposely picked these questions to share because for most of us, this is not part of our daily math numeracy skill use. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but hopefully you understand. It's not normally part of our everyday life, right? If you remember how to do all of this, awesome. If you don't, awesome. Like, but I purposely picked something that is not something that we're commonly doing. So now that you have kind of briefly glanced at that, again, I'm not asking you to solve them. I am going to have us in the chat collectively answer some questions. So my first question for you, and you can add this to the chat if you are willing, is, as you looked through that, how did the problems, or how do they make you feel? Confident, excited, nervous, intimidated? If you could throw some adjectives in the chat about how that page, or those 2 pages of problems, how did that make you feel? Overwhelmed? Anything else? Seeing number 18 at the top of the first page made me feel lost. Yeah, for page 1, number 18, what's happening? Confident, I like it. Math illiterate. Oh, I'm loving this. this honesty, this vulnerability here. I used to know this stuff. Yep, puzzled. Okay. Was there anything, any words, any phrases, any images that looked familiar to you? Anything. If you have anything that looked familiar to you, whether it was a word, a phrase, an image that you've seen before, if you could put that in the chat, that looked familiar. I'm seeing answers come in. I'll read them in just a minute. If there's anything else you would like to add. We got equation. All of it looked familiar. Graph, formulas, polynomials, variables. Okay, and I'm remembering what X and Y, and I'm remembering what some of us said earlier too. So even though maybe we, are feeling puzzled or like confused or overwhelmed, there are some aspects that look familiar. And so bringing that to the forefront, that's what this question is doing. Okay, what about unfamiliar? What aspects were unfamiliar to you? Maybe something that you used to know, but you forgot, or something you never learned, whether it's a word or phrase or maybe a type of formula or something like that. Anything that was unfamiliar to you. And if you could be specific with an example, or maybe it looks difficult. Like I used to know this, but it looks difficult. Some of the vocabulary, polynomial functions. Yeah, like looking at the source of these GRASS packets. What are they? They are actually free and open resource, which is where I got these questions from. But yeah, the exponential function. So maybe we've seen it in the past and we don't remember, or it's really unfamiliar, difficult, but I'm liking the specificity of these. And so, or maybe I know one of the vocabulary words in there was root. And so if that word is unfamiliar in this context, like even writing down the word root, right, in a math context, what that means, that's unfamiliar, or I'm having trouble remembering, or whatnot, right? So making this list of what is unfamiliar on this page or these pages. The last question we're going to do as a large group. So is then looking at that list, thinking through what could we do to help ourselves feel more confident when trying to solve these problems. Now, if this were something that we were doing in class, I wouldn't hand this to students cold. It would have something to do with what we've been studying, or maybe if students are reviewing for a standardized test, I would be either checking to see if they remember something, or it would be a review, right? And so it wouldn't be new content that I'm throwing at students. So thinking through, okay, well, what would help me feel more confident when I'm trying to solve these problems? Some ideas. Sometimes, like, math anxiety is real. And so sometimes just calming down our nervous system so that we can access information that we know, and that we can kind of quiet that amygdala hijack. Taking a deep breath and reminding yourself that you can do it, that is a strategy, right? Focusing, I'm going to break down this problem into steps. I'm going to just look at, maybe I have to cover up everything else on the page, and I'm just going to, like, all the other problems, and then I'm going to look at this problem and I'm going to break it down. I'm going to look for the parts that I feel comfortable with, and that's what I'm going to start with. Or maybe I do need to Google a word. I'm not on a test. I'm not at a test right now, right? I'm studying. I'm going to Google a word. I forgot what root means. I'm going to go Google it. Or I'm going to find a video about it to refresh my memory. Or what other, I like Jeremy added, working with a partner or small group. I'm going to go find someone else. And I like too that it's not ask the teacher, right? I'm going to go find someone else to talk to about this. But these are strategies, right? So that students can use, that we can use. And so if you want to share a strategy that you like to use when you feel stuck in the chat, that would be awesome. But I am going to go on to step 5, where then I would encourage you, again, this would be part of a lesson, or there'd be some reason why I gave you these problems, to then try out your strategies. Like figure out 1 or 2 that make sense for you, to then try to tackle this list that you made on what looks unfamiliar. And just try the problems, right? And then after you've tried the problems, you may not have finished them, right? After you've completed it to the best of your ability, I want you to reflect, like, how did it go? What did you learn about yourself through this process? And do you still have questions that maybe you do want to ask a teacher or a classmate? And so just really kind of engaging with, how did that go? Even if I didn't answer all of these questions. So this sheet, so I wanted to kind of like just jump right into the sheet, or, this reflection page, before explaining the rationale for it. So you'd have something to kind of hang on to as I'm talking about it. But this page came out of my experience working with my students when I was in the classroom, especially with math. I was teaching math and reading, but especially with math. But I think this could be used for anything. But I noticed a lot of times that my students, when they encountered a problem that they didn't understand, or we may have worked through several of those problems the day before, but for whatever reason, if they have trouble with memory for one reason or another, or a learning disability, or math anxiety kicks in and doesn't matter how much I know, I can't access it right now. I would just notice students just put their pencils down or put their papers down and just wait for me to come and help them. Like they wouldn't even try. They just were like, I'll just wait for Lindsey to come. And I didn't realize how much I was enabling that until I started kind of uncovering through some other kind of professional development and ahas about how I wasn't really creating independent learners. I was creating dependent learners. And so this was one of the ways that I saw that manifest, was students just not even knowing how to tackle something if they didn't know. And so I realized that I was assuming a lot of skills, and I was forgetting how much I was taught certain strategies, because now they're second nature to me, but they weren't at first. Like I was taught study strategies. And so I tried to make things as explicit as I could on this page. Like, you have something in front of you. How does it make you feel? First of all, let's acknowledge that, because your emotions could be all over the place. They could be positive, they could be negative, it could be neutral, but like, what are you feeling? Because it's important to acknowledge that, to then be able to kind of set that aside. But then let's take stock of everything that does look familiar. That can build some confidence. Now let's try to be specific. Instead of saying, I don't know, which is valid, but let's try to get more and more specific with our questions. So it's not just, I don't understand, but what aspects don't you understand? Is it a vocabulary word? Is it the negative in front of this number? Is like, what specifically, helping students kind of really get at something, a very specific question that they can either ask me, but before they ask me, with this is what I'm trying to teach, maybe a classmate, maybe Google, maybe, right? Like, I'm not always going to be there. So how can I help instill these different strategies in students? And then providing some ideas for trying to get unstuck. But they may have their own, what works for one student isn't going to work for another student. Trying it, and these words are very intentional, trying them, and then leaving room for them to have not completed it, right? And still having questions. And so again, just working against that math mindset of, I have to have all the answers and otherwise I'm dumb, or, it's no, let's just keep persevering, right? This is at a very high level of of writing and vocabulary on this sheet, but I think that this could be adapted for any subject, even inserting emojis for how you feel, right? People can circle emojis. This can be, I think, simplified based on your class, your students, your needs, or enhanced, right? And you know, in whatever way. So on the slides that you will get in an email, you have access to a copy, and you can click on it, you'll get your own copy, and you can edit it if this at all seems helpful to you. But this strategy for implementation of thinking about these transition skills are, regardless of the content, this is a math example, yes, but regardless of the content, making study strategies transparent. And that's what I really had to work on as an instructor, that I was assuming too much, and I really needed to try to break it down. And this was my attempt at doing that. So anyways, if you have comments, questions, you can put them in the chat. I hope this idea is useful, even if this specific page isn't useful for your specific students. But yeah, I just wanted to share that. And you can take control, Kristine.
Yeah, I just want to say how much I love this work that Lindsey does, where, you know, getting students to think about where they're stuck, why they're stuck. And that is something, you know, I've been talking about with reading for a long time, students being metacognitive. And I think it's a great reminder that we talk a lot about self-regulating, in order for students to actually get to a place where they're able to self-regulate in the classroom, such as plan or apply their learning or monitor whether or not they're understanding, evaluating what they're doing, evaluating what they're learning, and making adjustments to use strategies that work for them. Metacognition is really a foundation for that. And so getting students, kind of pushing them into spaces where they have to pay attention to their own thinking is really important. And it can be done in any content, or even with, you know, different levels. Emojis, for example, work great. And all of our adults, no matter what level they are metacognitive in their lives in some way. And they do pay attention to their thinking at different times. They don't always in the classroom. And so I want to talk a little bit about the CCRS standards, English language arts, and how we need to talk about the TIF, particularly learning strategies in the TIF. Are so important. And this is just a word cloud that I made. I took the ELA anchor standards and drop them into a word cloud, just a word cloud tool. And I took out everything but like the action verbs about what students need to do. And, you know, looking at this, there's a lot of big thinking that our students need to do, and they can do quite a bit of this thinking in their lives, in their adulting lives. But we do want to make sure that students are aware that they need strategies to ensure comprehension. We can teach strategies, but if students don't recognize that they need them or that meaning is breaking down, it's going to be difficult for them to apply or fix what's going on. So I want to take just maybe 3 minutes here. And this is from a text called A Practical Guide to Field Construction Management. I wanted to stay with one of the themes. Let's take about 3 minutes, go ahead and read this, and read it as if you were going to engage in a conversation about the text. I'm going to click to the next slide that has some questions on it. And then Gail is going to put those questions in the chat box so that I can go back and you can look back to the text. But first, some questions here. What happened? Where were you confused? Where were you distracted? Where did you lose interest? I did pretty quickly. Where was there a challenging word, or where was there a complex sentence that you really started losing track? Where did you make a connection to something? If any of you were at my language and literacy session about a reading toolbox, this is similar to what we did. So I want to go back here. And I want you to be able to look at this, and these questions are in the chat box, and go ahead and chat, answer any of these questions as you were reading this, where, again, where you were like, I'm not sure what that word means. Oh, Jeremy's 1890. Wow. That's pretty cool, actually. Where did you find you were becoming distracted or frustrated, or you had to reread? Go ahead and put in the chat box. Even that first sentence, Nina, is a long one. Yep. Were there any words that were particularly challenging? Okay, so Susan made some connections as well as Jeremy because of the building. Yeah, there's some big syllable, multi-syllable words here, right? Carly, I agree with you there. It seemed unnecessarily difficult. And I usually get a response from somebody when I do a workshop that this is something that our students aren't going to have to read, right? But for many of our students, this may as well be something they're trying to read, right? There may be shorter sentences, but there's still unknown vocabulary. There's still a lack of background knowledge. There's still distractions where their eyes are going across the words, but they're actually not paying attention, and they're stopping, and because there's too many words they don't know. This is real, and just so you know, this is about from a practical guide to field construction management. And I did look around just to see, just even here in the Twin Cities, are there any 2-year college programs that have construction management programs? And right away popped up North Hennepin, Dakota County Technical College, Dunwoody. I've had students go off to all 3 of those schools, not necessarily for construction management, but I was kind of surprised. I thought, oh, this might be at the U of M for a 4-year degree, but this is like a basic textbook about construction management. And I thought, wow, this is something that my students would obviously struggle with. But there's lots of fix-up strategies. Which ones are your go-to strategies? Which ones are the ones you tend to rely on? We don't all use all the strategies all the time in the same way. But what of these? Julie Rasmussen found the text intriguing. I'm happy to, it was an online textbook. I'm happy to share it with you. What of these fix-up strategies, what do you find most often going to reread? And I've asked my students, what is something you do when you get confused? And they'll say, well, I reread, but that's not really a strategy. It sure is a strategy. Summarize. What else? What are your go-to, or what did you find yourself doing while you were reading that passage? Read aloud. Yeah, I agree with that. Depending on what it is, especially if the sentences are long. Adjust speed. Yes, so many of our students can think that Effective readers read fast, and that's one of the things that makes an effective reader, but effective readers adjust their speed. Making connections. Rosemary, what did you make a connection about? What did you connect to?
Well, I used to do estimates all the time for making a bridal gown, and there are
cool.
just so many variables. And so as soon as I started reading, that's what I remembered.
I love that. And it's another great example of the richness, the rich experiences that adult educators bring to the classroom. I love that. Estimates for bridal gowns. You can read together, connecting to things you already know. So how many of these strategies do your students know? Or how many of these strategies do you think, what do you think here are the go-to strategies that maybe your students have? Reread is one. And we can teach these strategies. We certainly can teach these strategies. Translate. That should be up there, actually, Nikki. Thank you. Because, relying on your first language or home language or heritage language is absolutely a strategy. Asking questions, making connections. Yeah, we can teach strategies, right? We can work with students and talk about the value of previewing text features, right? We can work on using context clues. We can help students construct questions about what they're reading or ask them to read aloud. But here's the thing. They've got to know that they need to use a strategy. And in the TIF, learning strategies is really where I'm targeting right now. And two of the four skills, skill one, which is applying appropriate strategies for comprehending oral or written language in texts and listening activities. And the second, which is actually skill 4, articulate awareness of what helps one learn language and content. It is so important that our learners develop strategies that they feel comfortable with and that they feel confident in using. And those strategies are going to be different. So it's really important as we work through, teaching some core strategies that we give students an opportunity to recognize when things are going sideways, when they're listening or they're reading and all of a sudden it's just they're not understanding. To practice applying some strategies. And then Lindsey talked about this, to reflect. What did I do? Where did I do it? How did it help? Or maybe it didn't help. And that's okay. I've taught strategies before. Visualize is a perfect example. I've had students over the years who say, I don't visualize. I don't. That's just not, something that comes easily to me. And that's okay, as long as students have a little bit of a toolbox. So that reflection is really important. And I'm going to give you 3 examples, and I've given these examples before in workshops, but we need to slow students down when they're reading. And one way is to create a coding sheet. And a coding sheet is just a sheet that has directions, actions we want students to take. And Kristine, in her book, I read it, but I don't get it. That's such a great book. She talked about slowing students down. And in this case, this example is marking places where you make a connection and marking places where you have a question and highlighting any part of the text that you found yourself confused. Now, the student doesn't have to go forward and describe the connection or write the question or identify the fix-up strategy. In the beginning, it's enough for students to just note when things are happening in their head. You certainly can have them write in the margins and do more reflection. A lot of the coding sheets I've used summarize the text below. You can adjust as needed, but it helps students to slow down and stay engaged and to pay attention to their thinking. Another tool, and I'm glad that Lindsey said the goal isn't that students use these tools or these worksheets over and over and over and over and over again forever. The goal is that they internalize these processes and they start to just pay more attention to their thinking, and they start to identify strategies that help them understand. So in this case, evaluating roadblocks, it's just simply having students mark down whatever reason, like I got stopped here. I got stopped on the word blank, or the sentence was long, or I got confused about what this is about, or I started thinking about lunch. I mean, there's a lot of different things. And then this just simply asks students to think about, did you do anything or think about doing anything? Did you use a dictionary? Did you try to translate? Did you ask somebody a question? Did you reread, or did you just move on? And the reflection is really important. Were there places you should have clarified but didn't? Were there roadblocks that were okay to ignore? We all know we can ignore some things and still make sense. What did you learn about yourself as a reader? Another great example of this is a clarification chart. What it says, they write down exactly word for word, the phrase, the sentence, the confusing word. What's confusing? They say long sentence. I don't know anything about this. I don't know all the words. And thinking about what's the next step, and then what I think it means now. And so we want students to also see that application of strategies that they feel confident in using can make a difference in them, paying more attention, or in them being able to make meaning. And again, that reflection, what roadblocks did you choose to work with? Some students work with some and not others. Hey, I can look up words. What strategies did you use, and how did they help you understand the text? So just getting students thinking to be able to apply these really great TIF learning strategies, and to be able to learn no matter what they're reading or listening to, they have some strategies because they're stopping and recognizing that meaning is breaking down. There's no one size fits all learning strategy. We need to help students recognize that something is wrong, and to gather some fix-up strategies that work best for them. And they're going to be different. And even that conversation I've had with students, where one student says, I use this strategy. Well, how did that work for you? Did someone use another strategy? When students, this goes beyond content. We want to teach strategies, as Lindsey was talking about, that are transferable. So, keeping an eye on the time, we have a little bit of a wrap up here, and I believe Patsy is going to talk about some really great, of course, always great things coming up in Minnesota PD.
Stuff here. Just briefly, we want to give you a moment to, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, good. I just want to double check a couple things to make sure things are on your radar. If you could just click on the graphic of the announcements for a moment, and that will pull up. Yeah, so these this will get dropped in the chat in a moment, and we want to just give you a chance to join an advisory team, which is the season for wrapping together some of the wisdom that we have in our state to help us plan for professional development in the coming year. So thank you, Gail, for dropping that in the chat. So we have 3 teams that need new members in the coming year. One is around transitions, and this is the team that Carly helps us with. This is anything related to adult career pathways, IET, ACEs, TIF. If you work in that world or would care to delve into that, if you're really interested in career pathways work, really could use more help with that area of professional development, and you might be just the person we really could benefit from your voice on that team. The applications are due June 3rd. The administrator PD advisory team, if you are an administrator and are interested in helping us design professional development for people like you and who have roles in leadership, that application also due on the 3rd. And then the statewide professional development committee, and that is a committee devoted to the whole state and helping us think about all the different things that we offer as far as professional development statewide. So all of those teams are in need of program representatives. And then just a couple things to know. I'm just going to note maybe the first 4 things here. One is that the Adult Career Pathways Institute is tomorrow. And if you are interested in career pathways, I hope you would go ahead and register and join us for any portion of that you can tomorrow. It's virtual from 9 until 1. You can learn more on the website, of course, on the events page. It is going to start with Brad Haskamp, our state director, giving a welcome. Then we're introducing 3 career credential specialists, and then there's a couple of concurrent sessions after that. And then our statewide mentorship experience is going on. We're receiving applications now. The next cohort begins at the end of May. We need both mentors and mentees. There's more information, and Lindsey heads that work up. So you stick around after we close the webinar and you can speak with Lindsey if you have questions. There is an administrator webinar also happening next week. We have our speaker from Language and Literacy Institute on trauma-informed and healing-centered approaches to instruction, coming specifically to talk about leading programs with a more trauma-informed lens. Lucille Rosario will join us for that. And that actually begins at noon. We need to make that correction. That begins at noon on Tuesday. And then the math content webinar is coming up, Learning Math Asynchronously, best practices and resources on Thursday. Always good stuff afoot.
And I just want to make a plug for the statewide mentorship experience. Some of you may know I'm running a mini cohort right now teaching reading to adults. And one of my participants went through the mentorship experience and was mentored. And she's a newer teacher, and she just could not say enough about how that mentoring experience really just built her confidence and, made her feel part of our system. So I really encourage you to check that out, to be a mentor or be mentored. Anything else from the team?
I don't think so. Just a big thank you to Kristine and Lindsey, Carly for all your work on this. Really appreciate it.
Our pleasure. It's so great to have a transitions person here on our team.
I was
Thank
thinking
you.
that as well.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Lindsey or
Yeah,
Carly?
no. Yeah, thank you for coming. And I was thinking the same thing. I was like, go Carly.
Yeah, sadly, Carly had to step away to pick up her kids, but I will
Right, I
tell
just
her your
remembered
thanks.
that.
Yeah.